Hi, thanks, guys. So, I've just done a writing workshop. Some of the participants are here, and it was a workshop that I'd never done before, and I felt quite nervous about the whole process. How was it going to work? But it turned out pretty good, didn't it? It was awesome. So there's your quote for the day. So in a way, it's kind of prepared me for the talk now. So yeah, here we go. Well, there should be audio with this. Can you pump it up? Really loud.
Really loud.
Banging tunes, just like my DJ set last night. Whoa! The clapping is optional. You don't have to do that. Okay. Oop. Back. So I'm a graphic artist, designer, maker, writer, part-time DJ. So I DJ'd last night.
Whoop whoop.
And it was a banging party up until we were shut down by the police. So yeah, it was a great sound system, lots of bass, which is what I love very much. So anyway, so I think a lot about this suffragette. So this photograph was taken over 100 years ago, and she's delivering a message of protest through the dress that she's wearing. So the typography is letterpress, and these typefaces, these letters were designed by type designers from another era. So it's producing work that still communicates with us today, but that was produced over 100 years ago. Civil rights era in America. So this really powerful statement, when seen en masse, gives those simple words a real power and presence. This is work by the Atelier Populaire during the May '68 uprising in Paris, produced by art students working with the workers. This was a social media of its time, delivering powerful messages instantly and on the streets. John and Yoko proclaiming war is over if you want it. So a piece of Fluxus art delivered by maybe one of the most famous people in the world. And that was part of a campaign for their Christmas record, Merry Christmas, from John and Yoko. And I love the power of the typography. Again, just the isolation of the words and the text, when seen like this, is super powerful. This guy used to walk up and down Oxford Street, like the busiest street in London, campaigning against lust through eating meat and fish and birds. And this guy, it was his one-person campaign, and he'd walk up and down selling like a little booklet explaining why he thought lust came from eating peas. And everybody ignored him, but he carried on. This is the fashion designer Catherine Hamnett meeting our horrific Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. So when Hamnett was about to meet Thatcher, she opened her jacket to reveal this comment. It was campaigning against nuclear weapons. So that kind of like particular action in that particular moment delivered a really powerful image that became, kind of spread through the media. And this is work by Jenny Holzer in New York, Save a Kindness, because cruelty is always possible later. So this was part of a campaign. It was like an art installation on the Porno cinemas on 42nd Street. So this is before New York was cleaned up. So delivering these messages in unfamiliar places and spreading ideas through type and typography and connecting with people. So so all these examples that I've shown you are things that kind of connect with my work in some way, or some things that I've kind of gained inspiration from, and something that I think demonstrates the power of words and typography. So that's me on the left, and that's my sister on the right, and that's our pony, Misty, in the middle. So this was the first time that I got any recognition in the media. This photograph was taken by a friend of my father's, and she was a photographer, and it appeared in the local newspaper, and then it was in like the national newspaper in the UK. It was just this weird, they used to put these like weird little photographs in the newspaper. So yeah, that's me enjoying red wine at the age of 8. Fast forward a few years, this was when I was an art student, when I was about 22. So that guy with the long hair is staring at me, and I'm staring back at him. And it's crazy to think that, that kind of shy guy who, really didn't understand what he was doing. He went to art school, and now, 30 years later, he's in this hot room talking about his work, and the long hair is gone. What happened? So that's why I'm wearing a cap today, guys. But just kind of like looking at where I was then and, where I am now, it's been a kind of, it's been a lifetime's journey of trying to understand myself and understand where I fit into the world and, the kind of work I want to make. So yeah, so bear that in mind throughout this talk. So that was our student studio at the Royal College. So imagine the Royal College of Art, like the premier art college in the world. You had to be amazingly good to get into this place. And this are the conditions that we had to work in. Absolute chaos. Creative space. And no laptops. So I was at the Royal College in the late 80s, early 90s. So only the nerds in those days were interested in computers. I was far too rock and roll to play with a keyboard and a mouse and all that stuff. So my weapon of choice was the photocopier. So this was the kind of work I was making at the time, just kind of photocopies and grabbing type and looking for ways of making work. So at this stage, I was kind of experimenting with words and images and typewriter stuff and layering and textures, still kind of like grasping for some kind of message or something to say. And I think it's when I was at the Royal College, I was looking at textures more than anything. I think when I was at college, I was, beginning to grow up, and, it's the first time I've been away from home, meeting new and interesting people. The most interesting person I met is just sat there, my wife. And we've been married we've been together for 30 years. So, round of applause for us, guys. So yeah, so all that happened when I was at college. And then I started making these little books. So I was interested in self-publishing, making my own work, and that's a thread that's always kind of gone through my work, that I just wanted to kind of make my own comments and somehow get those out into the world, no matter how I did that. So I made these little books, very like little zines, kind of like A4 photocopy books that I would print like in my local photocopy shop. They thought I was mad. going in with all this like weird type to produce these little zines. So I'd make these books and I'd send them out to people who I thought I might like to work with, or people whose work I admired. So it was like my own campaign. It was like my own self-promotion. So, in those days we didn't have social media or websites much to speak of. So you had to kind of connect and reach out to people, in the physical world, with physical objects. So these were cheap to produce, and I made a whole series of works like this. And eventually, this is a friend of mine, Chad Ray. He did all the copywriting on this stuff. So this is maybe like 5 years after I left college, and I was beginning to understand the connection between words and images and phrases, and how type works, and how you fill in the gaps between what you want to say and how you're saying it, and you raise a chuckle in the audience. I think this is something we can all relate to. It's all those kind of like those phrases, that we hear over and over, and it's kind of like pulling the rug from underneath those cliches. And these are things that still kind of resonate and connect. So I think the way I was working was like picking graphic images to go with the type, and then slowly, so this is like mid to late 90s. So it's kind of got that feel about it of kind of bridging the gap between imagery and type and words and text. So I think through making work like this, I began to understand the kind of work I wanted to make later. I'll just have a quick drink of water. How's it going so far? Yeah? And there's a dog in the audience. That's always a good sign. So leaping forward by maybe 10, 15 years. So I left college and worked commercially, and kind of tried to figure out how I could work in the commercial world with my particular set of non-existent design skills. All I knew how to work was a photocopier. I didn't know how to use a computer, and everybody started using computers, and I kind of started to feel like I was the odd one out for some reason for not using them. So I got an iMac, and then a friend taught me how to use Photoshop, and that was it, really. So anyway, this is the Gulf of Mexico disaster 2010. So this is my friend Tom, whose idea it was to print a poster using oil from the oil spill. So he said, I'm going out to Louisiana next week. Can you design a poster that we can print out there? So I designed this poster, oil and water do not mix. And it was a kind of a very simple phrase, and it kind of talked about combining things together that shouldn't be mixed together, and the medium in which the poster was printed. So the poster was printed with the oil from the beach that was soaked in crude oil, and it produced this kind of rough, raw texture through the screen print. So there was lots of sand and debris within the material that had been collected, and it broke the screen, and it kind of made it really raw. So we made this poster, and it went out. By this time, the internet had been invented. So we put the poster on the internet, and it began to get traction in the media. And I was interviewed on the TV, on the Today Show, live in America. So I'd like to share now the most embarrassing moment of my entire life. Let's go.
An artist in London is using his creativity to shed light on the devastation brought on by this year's massive oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. His posters, "Oil and Water Do Not Mix," are printed with the crude that washed ashore in Louisiana. Anthony Burrill is the man behind the screen prints and joins me now on Skype. Anthony, let's start. These are limited edition posters that you've created. Can you tell us more about this project?
Yeah, it was... I just mumbled something about type and posters, and unintelligible rubbish that came out of my mouth. And the interviewer was like, great, good job. So yeah, I haven't been on TV since. But it's like, it's the power of, making a piece of work that then goes out into the world and gets picked up and becomes part of a news story, part of something else. And it's far away from me and how I made it physically, but it's out in the world now. And, we can kind of spread ideas like that through things like social media. And I still think the power of the poster is incredibly strong. Making statements and spreading those words and putting your thoughts upon the wall. I've been thinking a lot recently about, where my work comes from and how it is a bridge between me as a person and everybody else, everyone in this room, everyone in the, in the world. That it's those simple things. When things are super simple, there's less to go wrong and you can communicate in such a strong and direct way. And I think in the workshop this afternoon, we were looking at writing and how, the simplest ideas are the truest ideas, are the ones that, and we're talking about the kind of line between cheese and things that, the kind of, live, laugh, love. We've all seen that, and it's become this huge mantra of kind of ickiness. But in a way, it's kind of true, isn't it? There's still some kind of truth in that stuff. So, yeah, we shouldn't be afraid to say things we want to say, even if you kind of put those barriers within yourself to say things. So I'll talk a bit now about how I produce my work. So the guy on the left is Derek. So he's a typesetter who he trained in the 1960s to work with letterpress type. So I'm lucky enough to live in a town that has still got a letterpress type workshop. So Adams of Rye is a very old print workshop that's still hung on to its like traditional techniques. Rye as a town is a very traditional, old, historic town. That's where we live. And this amazing place is right in the heart of the town. And it's kind of part of everyone's lives in the town. So when I first so I lived in London, and then my wife and family moved down to the countryside, and I found this place, and I made this poster. So this is the first work I made there, 2003. And there was a connection between living in London. This was a phrase that I'd overheard in a supermarket as an old lady talking to the checkout girl, explaining the secret to a happy life was to work hard and be nice to people. And I just kind of remembered that phrase. And it's almost in the same realm as live, laugh, love. But it kind of still means something, I think. And I think the way I delivered it, it kind of takes that kind of like simple message and elevates it and spreads the word and makes it relevant to everybody. So I made this nearly 20 years ago, and it's still going strong. And that's Ian who prints the stuff. So I've taken over the workshop now with all my work. So here's a short film about the letterpress process. So the vibe in that place is incredible. I was there a couple of days ago, and you walk into it, and it smells of ink and wood, and because it's been there for such a long time, I've got a real emotional connection to that space. And when I see the wood type, I kind of start conjuring up things and want to kind of put them together and kind of create new work. So I think that kind of physical connection between me and the work is something that is incredibly important, and something that kind of gives the work its character. So I mentioned this piece of work and how it's spread around the world, and I love to take pictures off the internet that people post of it in their spaces. And yeah, it's kind of fascinating how it's kind of connected in so many ways in so many different places. So yeah, I've got a huge archive of this too. You know, when I'm feeling a bit low, you know, a bit lacking in self-worth, I look at this and think, yes, I've still got it. So yeah, I made this book. So yeah, this was published a couple of years ago, and it's got all my kind of writing and ideas, and it's still available from all good bookshops. So I'm showing it here really fast to give you a quick taste of it, but yeah, it kind of like encompasses everything, and it's kind of got all the work in there and all the words, and you know, the design is very simple. It's about, you know, the kind of the type on the cover and the how the whole thing sits together. So I still, you know, as part of my practice now, I produce a lot of the work myself, kind of physically. So I screen print. I work with amazing screen printers, Steve and Tracy, who've been commercial printers since the early 70s. So I love to make work in their workshop. It's like full of ink, and there's like ink's been splashed everywhere. It's completely crazy, and it's a very physical environment where I can play with the screen print and kind of layer things and kind of experiment. So this was a project for a record sleeve. So I took the letterpress type and kind of brought it into screen print to kind of experiment further. So making work like this that is completely analog, gives the work its kind of life, I think. So I'm lucky enough to travel. I once went to Romania to give a talk. How about that? So this was a project I did in Brazil. So this is kind of why I'm here. There's a long story attached to that. So I was going to Brazil to give a workshop, and I'd heard about a kind of letterpress printers, Gráfica Fidalga, who were a traditional workshop. They were kind of like the Adams of Rye, that like the workshop I use at home, but this is in Brazil, in this really kind of sketchy neighborhood in Sao Paulo. So we made this work together. So it's a translation of Work Hard and Be Nice to People, but into Portuguese. And it's so the type was a complete accident. The guy who I was printing with didn't speak English, I didn't speak Portuguese, and we were kind of just pointing and smiling at type. You know, we just used that the only language that we knew how. So we made this work, and we got it on the press, and he printed one copy, and I was like, yeah, thumbs up, let's print another one. So he printed another one, and then immediately the machine broke and the fan belt, and he was like, yeah, no more printing today. And we printed literally 2 copies. So he kept one and I kept the other. So again, kind of, this is a more recent project. So the wildfires in Australia, and a huge disaster, and something again to make work about and to connect with in some way. So I was working with some people in Australia who wanted to invite artists to make a piece of work about the wildfires and to raise money and to point attention to a natural disaster. So they sent me a box with with charcoal that had been produced during the wildfires. So this came in a box all the way from Australia. And in the screen print workshop, we mixed it with the ink. So in a similar process to how I worked with the oil and water way back in 2010, this is a kind of like another version of it. So I made this print, No Safe Place. So again, it's a quick process film. So through that work, there's, in recent years, there's been lots of protest happening in the UK. Extinction Rebellion happened. So I became part of the graphic team for that. Again, kind of like working in letterpress, but kind of connecting all the way back to the suffragette movement. So the lady in the dress, right at the beginning, she was wearing her own protest message, and it was communicated using the same typefaces that I'm using now. So there's a kind of historic connection that I feel is really important in my work, and how as I mentioned, print and posters are still important, and getting these messages out into the world. And there's so much to talk about now. The world is in such a state of flux and kind of chaos, and everything's like every day things change, and it's like how do we make sense of that? And I think my way of making sense is through the work I make. So as well as kind of working with people like Extinction Rebellion, I kind of have gallery exhibitions. And I think this is another strand of my work that is about connection, and it's about making work, and being a kind of, I suppose I had my roots in the commercial world as being a commercial designer, and now I'm in the art world as an artist. And I think that bridge, years ago there was a real distinction between commercial work and art, and I think in the past 30 years that question's not really relevant so much anymore. So this is a gallery I work with in London, and I get to do an exhibition there every year or so, and to make new work that's not necessarily connected in any particular way with things. But I think for this show I concentrated on the ampersand, that connector between words and that connector between people. I've got a great love of graphic design and graphic ephemera and graphic languages. So during lockdown, I took the time to sift through my collection of ephemera that I've picked up over the years. I've got boxes of this stuff, of type samples and stickers and labels. And I scanned in all these fragments, and there's like 500 examples of inspiring design and typefaces and things that I've kind of connected with throughout my career, really. So I think during lockdown I was in the studio a lot, kind of trying to make sense of the work that I'd made over the past 3 decades, and how that work's going to go forward over hopefully at least another decade or more. So this work is my visual handwriting and my visual language, and I think it's all analog material, produced in a time before digital, and now I'm presenting it in a digital way. So this website, anthonyburrill.xyz, is a free open source for everyone to kind of to look at this material, download it, and use it for inspiration. This is my gift to the world, guys. So, was that a round of applause there? Yes. Thanks, guys. I was just needing that affirmation just then. So from that archive project, I made this book, Look and See. So it's like a beautifully produced, bound book that we funded through a Kickstarter. So it's got all the stuff in it that I love. So I guess my main work is making posters and prints. So far, this is like a kind of catalogue of stuff. There's about 30 works here. And they all use the same type, they all use the same approach. And it's those restrictions that I work within. I think give the work its restriction, but also its freedom. So I look at the words and the ideas and how best to communicate those ideas, and how to play with the type, and how to create memorable posters out of these phrases. So I make work when it comes along, and I make new prints when they come along. And sometimes I feel the pressure to make new work, and then other times it all just kind of comes out. And I'm not really sure where it comes from. And a lot of these phrases are, things that have been floating around in my head, and things that, develop some kind of language and voice that are spread out. So through making and selling these prints, I can, continue to be an independent creative, working on my own terms. And when I do work commercially, then I work on projects that I feel some kind of connection with, and something that I feel is going to connect with my work. And I'm not just used as a visual stylist, but I'm used, as somebody who's got a kind of graphic understanding and a graphic language. So I think that this is my kind of like largest scale and, in a way, biggest piece of work. What is my biggest piece of work? So this is in Leeds, in the north of England. So I've got a strong connection with Leeds. It's where I studied at university, and where my love of graphic design started, really. So I was commissioned to make a piece of work for the end of this building. So I was kind of quite keen to make a really simple work. It was commissioned just before COVID, and COVID delayed the process of the work, which meant it came out just as the world was emerging from the lockdowns. And these phrases, me and you and me, it's about those human connections and how communities happen. It's about us in this room right now, and it's about the way that the words continue off the top and the bottom. It's a never-ending stream of connection and simplicity and unity. Told in black and white and told in type, and having this huge building to work with, and it's like, what do I want to say that is going to still remain relevant today, and hopefully in 10 or 20 years' time, when hopefully the building is still standing there. And again, I'm on the lookout for photographs of it with people interacting with it, and I think this is when the work comes alive and really means something. When you see people interacting like this, so people that I don't know or will never know, but we're somehow connected through this work. So I think it demonstrates the power of the work, and I think it demonstrates people's need for some kind of connection and a sense of place and where it is in the world, where they are in the world. So yeah. Woo.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Anthony, so much for bringing your gift to the world. And I think what's really fantastic in your presentation is, in this world of so much technology being advanced at such a rapid pace, that there's still beauty in the simplicity of the poster and of words. So I'd love to also share with you and then ask you one question, and then we'll have one question for the audience. Work hard and be nice to people. It is all over the world. I have a print of it myself in my home, but I've also seen it in office spaces where pressure was high, toxicity was around. You know, it was difficult to actually collaborate and work hard and be nice to people. And I saw people actually pointing at your poster in that office environment as a reminder of it. So I just wanted to say thank you for creating it, because it created an easier work environment for myself and for others. And with that said, yes, thank you. I would love to ask you, you know, in this world of constant overstimulation and a lot of dishonest messaging kind of being sent to us on a rapid pace, how do you hold on to what feels meaningful and true to you in your work and your messaging?
Good question. I think, well, you know, I'm in my mid-50s now, and I'm kind of, I think that stuff just comes with age and, you know, a kind of life experience and kind of hopefully with some kind of wisdom or insight that comes with that. And I think it's, you know, I think in your 20s you'll do anything. You just want to be out there and doing things, and you know, you like your first commercial client is incredible. You know, like your first paycheck is a real moment where you think, I'm actually being paid for this thing. When am I going to be found out? You know. But then in your 30s, you know, you may be over that first wave of excitement, and you're kind of figuring things out a little bit more. And in your 40s, you almost kind of think, right, I'm going to make work that I feel is important and I want to share with people. So I think it's, yeah, when I got into my 40s, you know, I still had the kind of the energy of youth, but, you know, maybe a bit more wisdom. But and now I'm in my 50s, I'm like, yeah, this is the good bit now. You know, I've got all that knowledge and all that experience, and I can do stuff like this. You know, I can stand up in front of all these people and talk about my work, with, you know, hopefully eloquently and with meaning. And, you know, that is just stuff that happens over the year. It happens, you don't even notice that stuff happening. So yeah.
Right on. We have time for one audience question. So who wants to ask a question in the audience? Raise your hand. Okay. Actually, take that one. Yes, perfect.
Thank you. How do you make design like the visual message, and both also the written or the script, the words? How do you make them memorable?
I think that the memorable things are the simple things, aren't they? You know, it's kind of, you know, a moment when you're somewhere and there's a song at the moment and it says something like, you really know when you're in the moment when you make a memory, you know, a memory that lasts. And I think by being in that moment and making that connection or discovering that insight, that it's just that moment of, you could say it was inspiration, but I think it's noticing those little interactions that you have and those kind of messages that come to you, and you just pick them out of the stream and you hold on to them. And that was the same with the work hard and be nice to people. It was just like something that was just in the world, and I just grabbed it and held on to it. And I think personally, by making things simple and thinking, or getting rid of all the extra information that we don't need, and just thinking of like the really important stuff. And I think because the letterpress type that I use, it's got a kind of timeless quality to it. It's not like the latest, trendiest typeface that will feel dated in 2 or 3 years' time. It's something that comes from a different age, from a different method of communication, but it's still, it kind of suits me and my character and my work, I think. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Anthony.